Good afternoon. My name is Greg Pullen. I'm an economic development practitioner from Australia, and I'm here today with a panel from France, Scotland and Australia, and we're to talk about celebrating seaweed, the gold of the sea. Firstly, I'd like to ask each of you to just introduce yourself, and I'll start with you, Gunal.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I'm Gunal Calvez. I'm the General Manager of Biotech Marine. I'm a chemical engineer by training, and I've been occupying a different position within the CEPIC Group, our mother company, over the last 20 years, both in business, managing a business unit, and now the General Manager of Biotech Marine. We are a leading manufacturer and designer of cosmetic actives extracted from seaweed or obtained by biotechnology, either stem cells from marine plants or cells from macroalgae.
Cherry?
Hello, I'm Cherry Wainwright. I'm from the Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen in Scotland. I'm the director of a Centre for Natural Products in Health, which is an academic-based research centre that focuses on identifying novel pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals from natural products. For our pharmaceutical approach, we take the approach of target identification and focus on screening for biologically active molecules from natural products directed specifically at those targets. In terms of nutraceutical research, we really focus on the impact of diseases such as metabolic diseases on nutritional status in individuals and look at how nutraceuticals can improve the nutritional status.
And Pia?
So I'm the director of a new startup company in Australia, Venus Shell Systems, and I've only been in that now for about 18 months, and prior to that I was an academic at university and have been for the last 20 years basically, focusing on the sustainability of marine food sources, but always coming to a point where seaweed is the key to unlocking sustainability, but it's also, I've found, the key to unlocking a lot of the nutritional deficiencies and challenges that we face. So that's why I've spun off into a company, because realising that challenge just wasn't happening in an academic setting for me, and stepping outside is what I've done now, and the journey I'm on.
So, in celebrating seaweeds, the gold of the sea, we want to look at the from its use as a medicine to expanding culinary uses. Seaweed is still finding its place in the gastronomical sea. Apart from Southeast Asia and Japan, where seaweed is consumed and with great passion, in other countries, especially in Europe, they might struggle to find the uses for it. So with a panel from three different backgrounds, it's fair for me to ask at the outset what each of you see as the major difficulties faced by producers of seaweeds in getting their products into the marketplace. I'll start with Pia.
Well, you've sort of touched on it a bit, and that is, I think, the sophistication of the seaweed industry as a biomass crop. Indeed, it is the biggest aquaculture produce globally in terms of biomass, and that's poorly recognised in the West. And in the East, it's been built on traditional uses. And so even though it's a big global crop, it doesn't follow the same regulatory constraints as agriculture or indeed pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals that we're entering into from this crop. So the sophistication of the industry is where it faces a challenge in being adopted by other industries that already manufacture foods or pharma or nutraceutical or cosmetics, because it doesn't have that regulatory backing. I mean, if you go into an Asian food store in Australia, for example, even the species are so incorrect. The analogy would be to be calling a banana a potato in a fruit shop, and that's how badly regulated the industry is. And for the industry to gain respect, it actually has to rise to the level of other modern crops from land, and I think that's both its challenge, but I see it also as a real opportunity, because there's technologies out there, there's regulations out there that we can just adopt, but those that do it, I think, will be the ones who lead unlocking seaweed in the West and its sophistication.
Jerry?
Just following on from that, I think I would say that consistency of a product is highly important in terms of a nutraceutical. If you're wanting to introduce seaweed extract as a food supplement, then to have a clear understanding of what the nutritional content and value of that product is, and being able to produce it on a consistent scale so that it is acceptable within the market. Plus also recognizing that there are other food or marine-derived nutritional supplements available, that it's a big challenge to compete with those ones.
And Gunnar?
Yes, and for us, Biotech Marine, being a designer of marine ingredients for the cosmetic industry, it is very important to demonstrate to our customer the link between the nature, the wonderful biomass, which is seaweed, and the science, the proof of concept, by making biological studies, by checking the phytochemistry, the secondary metabolites, which are in the active we propose to the market. And the most difficult challenge for us is to demonstrate this link between the nature, wonderful nature, and the science. And it has to be understandable by our customers, L'Oreal, Johnson, Estée Lauder, but more important, it has to be understood by the consumers. And this is a challenge.
So if we are to see seaweeds and the natural ingredients and extracts out of seaweed to find their place in the pharmaceutical, nutraceutical and cosmetic industries, what does the industry really need to do to establish its position that we all wish for, and that's to be a valued member of that product chain? Jerry, from your perspective?
I think to develop any product that has particularly nutraceutical or pharmaceutical value, in order to, and regulation's been mentioned an awful lot in the last couple of days, and in order to be able to make any health claims, then every part of the world has different regulatory requirements. So any company considering marketing whether it's an extract or trying to identify single molecules from seaweed that have potential use in health, either as a preventative to maintain good health or potentially for the treatment of disease. The pathways can be quite long and extended, and depending on the route, whether it's nutraceutical or pharmaceutical, the regulatory pathways are quite different as well.
And Pia?
Well, I think it's a sort of a vertical chain that we're working on behind the scenes here. Although seaweeds already have come out in Western markets, and they are indeed in some cosmetics and people starting even to promote that. The work behind the scenes in integrating many sources of knowledge, from the biology of seaweed to the processing chemistry, to the packaging regulatory requirements and how to get to the market face, is something that we really need to work on. There's a lot of science, there's a plethora of scientific journals presenting the opportunities of seaweeds in antibacterial, antifungal, anti-cancer, a range of things, but they're conducted in isolated silos of academic research, and rarely, when you look at these papers, they're confounded. There's ad hoc, there's a seaweed from here and a seaweed from a tropic and an Antarctic one taken at one place, one time, the species are wrong. And that kind of research doesn't really help progress the industry, and we need to trigger a way to get many disciplines of science and many industry representatives of those fields of science working together to unlock that pathway.
So what we're hearing is there's a bit of confusion about the attributes and the different species and so on. So I ask you now, what comes first? The marketing spin about the benefits of the product and the ingredient, the ability to produce a consistent ingredient that goes into a formulation at a later stage, or the alliance with a production house to work out what you're going to produce. And Janelle.
Okay, we are working in the cosmetic industry, and cosmetic is definitely a marketing-driven market. Storytelling is important for us, for our customers, and even for the final consumers. So my point of view is that marketing comes first, but marketing without a strong science back is not sufficient. So marketing and science is the winning team to my point of view, but marketing comes first.
Pia.
I definitely agree that the story and the science are important, but I think that the current thing that's lacking is a regular scalable supply, because I think you can tell a great story about many seaweeds, and there's so many metabolites in seaweeds with diverse applications, but really the consistent, controlled, scalable supply, especially cultivated crops, because if you look, seaweed is actually mostly a cultivated crop. 95% of seaweed production is farming. It's not wild harvest, but it's not well controlled and regulated towards commercial products in the West. And so I think that it's actually in the West has an opportunity to scale product that can be delivered to those markets, because there's already many good stories. Let's just start opening up the supply.
Jerry?
As a scientist, you might expect me to immediately say that the science should come first, but I actually think all three are very important together. As was said, the marketing really can only happen if there's an underpinning understanding of the science. The science can only be conducted if you've got good quality product to test the scientific underpinning of any health claims, and to have that you need a good and consistent supply. So my view is that actually all three need to happen in synergy.
Right, and I now get you to expand on an example where each of you are from a different scientific background or a different sphere in which your career has taken you. The relationships between researchers, producers, formulators and the marketers have to be developed. It's really a joint effort. Can each of you please give an example of where you have seen this working well and resulted in a success or a partial success thus far? Start with you, Pia.
Well, I think you can see many examples of where it hasn't worked, and I think the current, would you say, pathways, or the traditional pathways and following careers in academia, it actually doesn't lead you naturally into a pathway of commercialising the outcomes of science. And you're actually not encouraged in the academic side of things to commercialise. I mean, the term is used and given lip service, but there's no point scoring that academics thrive on. There's no point scoring in stepping outside and not publishing something and commercialising something. And indeed, in the academic sector, you're even punished for that. And then on the other side, that I've been seeing a lot of as well, is that looking into academia, there's a lot of poor understanding of what science could do for industry, because there's a real communication, I would say a cultural barrier between the two. And we've seen here at Biomarine, there's a lot of discussions about transitions between science and industry, and it's nearly a cliche now that we have to do that. But I think that the mechanisms that are in place are not quite there, but I can see that many universities and industries are trying to create hubs and nodes of discussion, nodes of testing, commercialisation, and then there are now government incentives in place to get academics into industry. And I really think continuing on that trajectory in mixing and forcing the two cultures to interact is where I have seen unlocking of some really exciting trajectories.
Right, have you got an example, Jerry?
I suppose the middle ground between pure academic research and commercialization is knowledge exchange, and that is where the knowledge base in the academic environment can help feed into the industry's needs. So if you have industry-led research where the question is to help the growth of the company, but they require academic input, I think that's a perfect fertile ground for knowledge exchange. To just give a personal example of that, we were working with a very small seaweed company in the north of Scotland who wanted to get some help in being able to market their product more effectively. And the way to do that was to really look at the nutritional content of their seaweed extract. And so we were able to undertake analysis of the antioxidant capacity and various other nutritional components, which they could then put onto their labeling of their product, and compared it to the chemical profiles of other seaweed products out there. And so I think there is a space there for pure academic-based researchers to really feed into helping SMEs or even larger companies build their products.
Yes, I'll give a concrete example. Some years ago, our marketing analyzed the market and discovered that there was a need for the cosmetic for anti-pollution active, to protect the skin from the pollution or to detoxify the skin. Then, having said that, we worked with an academic team which was working in Paris University with a very specific microalgae, which is called Senedesmus of Sahel, which is a microalgae living in the Sahel desert under strong irradiation. And this seaweed is living in tough conditions. Strong UV, hot temperature, nearly no water except a drop of water in the morning. And by analyzing this seaweed, we discovered that there is very interesting secondary metabolite in this seaweed to fight against this strong environment. And by making, after extraction of this seaweed, some biological studies, we demonstrated with this university academic team that this seaweed gave very good properties to detoxify the cell, to prevent, to downregulate the senescence of the skin cells under pollution. And last but not least, it was also a challenge to produce this seaweed in bioreactor, because this is a microalgae. You cannot, of course, collect from the Sahel desert. So we had to work to grow this seaweed into bioreactors and to be able to have a biomass to extract it later. So this is a good example of how we put into action science, academic team, production, clinical studies.
Thank you. So if we are to see seaweed or extracts flourish, what do you see as the biggest impediment to overcome in the current environment? The unknown within the Western society of, we've made mention at the start that the Japanese and the Asian countries accept seaweed for what it is. Is it that unknown in that Western society, the science, or the competition and appeal of other ingredients and how producers, be they in whichever field, in the foods or in the chemical pharmaceutical industry, how they will react and how the competition will pan out. So start with Cherry on this one.
That's quite a difficult one. There's a lot of unknowns in there. I would say that what is unknown is what the potential market is. Who are you actually trying to attract as consumers of, for example, seaweed extracts as a nutritional supplement? Is it the worried well, those who want to keep a good eye on what they eat and maintain good nutritional status, or is it targeting it at individuals who perhaps have a poor nutritional status, say those who are obese, who have metabolic syndrome, etc. So I would say that yes, acceptability in different cultures is one challenge, but also who are you actually going to be targeting for these kind of products?
Pia.
My perspective and response from the public in general is that seaweeds are quite broadly accepted as, oh yeah, those things are good for you. People that eat them in Okinawa, for example, they live for a long time. So there's some sort of, there's not the irk factor that you get in some of the other solutions to the food shortages or protein shortages. Like I think insects have a bigger hurdle to climb than seaweed does in terms of palatability. So I think we're starting on a pretty nice platform. It's the ocean. If you're getting it from clean areas, then you're ticking those boxes. So I think that our competitors, really not insects. I think seaweeds actually, if you look at the investment per production, seaweeds, they such a small-scale investment to a massive biomass production globally compared to, say, microalgae, where there's been about $10 billion spent in the last decade for a very small production output. Seaweeds are there in terms of biomass. And now it's just taking the step over into the mainstream by delivering some rigour and sophistication once again into the seaweeds. And I think we're at the stage now where, because in the West we don't have the culture and the legacy of eating seaweeds in foods, that our main hurdle to get into there, those markets, is actually to get into the clinical trials phases now. And you touched on the success of some projects because of clinical trials, and that's what we need to do, whether it be in food, in cosmetics sectors. And that's what I like about the Biomarine Network here at the moment, is that there is a lot of opportunity and service providers to help you leapfrog into getting some of that clinical work and the regulatory requirements down pat. And in a way, because we're opening the door up to the West here, we can take the lead in what the regulations around what seaweeds need to be, because basically regulators don't know themselves. In Australia, for example, it's a non-prescribed good. It basically means that our customs doesn't know what to do with it, so it can go in and out. It's only regulated on two things that have been a reactionary response, and that's iodine content and arsenic contents. And so we've got the opportunity to drive what the really sensible regulations should be around seaweed as a new biomass. And it's really only a matter of time, because those clinical trials and things are starting to happen now, and indeed that's what we're doing in our company today.
I think the three impediments you were mentioning are really opportunities. Science, we need science. It's been described all over these 2 days. Competition of other actives, synthetic actives, but we have seaweed, we have naturality. The consumer wants naturality, so we are the best for that. Now, for me, I would add a fourth constraint, which is a regulatory. Regulatory in our cosmetic market is today becoming a constraint. For example, our biggest customers, they are global. They play global. They want to launch a skincare in Europe, in US, in Asia, the same. But the regulation is different. And for example, in China right now, to have an active accepted, or an excipient, you have a positive list. It's black or white. And if you innovate, if you work on a new species, if you work on a new microalgae, on a new extraction, it's difficult to innovate and your active is not on this positive list. And then you have a constraint to innovate on one hand, and on the other hand, you are not on the positive list. It's really a constraint, and it's really a barrier, this regulatory aspect.
Right now, it's an unscripted question, so if you were to have a crystal ball, where would you see the market and the product out of seaweed being in, say, 10 years' time? Pia.
Well, I think seaweed, like in the eastern nations, is going to be a major global crop. There already are major farms throughout Asia, and really we just need to start adopting the production technologies suitable to specific locations, choosing our specific species, and working on selective breeding programs in some instances for those species. That technology is already well adopted in other agricultural and animal industries. So I think it is going to be a major crop player. It doesn't need the freshwater resources that land crops need. Yeah, I think it's going to be up there with the wheat and the soybean and the corn of the future.
Janelle?
Okay, I would see two drivers. One driver is the respect of biodiversity and sustainability. Our customer, the consumers, they want definitely that we respect the biodiversity. They want that we don't destroy anything from the nature. So I would see the market going towards more production in bioreactor, more production by biotechnology to really have zero impact on the environment. That's the number one. Number two, more substantification, more objectivation of the product, more clinical studies, quicker results in 1 week instead of 1 month. This is, according to me, a trend in the cosmetic industry.
And Cherry, where would you like seaweed to have contributed in the health industry?
I guess in terms of health, I'd like to see it being perceived in 10 years' time in a similar way to fish oils, that these kind of supplements are good to take, that they form part of providing individuals with a good balance of what is required to maintain a good nutrient status.
Thank you. And I thank all the panellists for their contribution. This being one of the last sessions on the program in BioMarine 2015, I'd like to thank the audience as well. And I suppose now is a good enough time where we can really talk about the rugby. And Australia hasn't been mentioned from this podium, but yes, we're the dark horse, and I'm sure be it New Zealand or South Africa, yeah, hopefully Australia will be there. Thank you.